And it's a good seg into this topic too, because I'm really hoping this thing has some legs over the holidays, because I'm thinking about, I mean, Spider-Man's going to crush everything.
Oh yeah.
Spider-Man's going to hog everything. But outside of that, I mean, you have Sing. It's not really a banner year for Christmas this year. You have like Sing 2's coming out. I can't wait for Licorice Pizza. Personally, that's the one I'm excited for. American Underdog's not really going to do too much damage, I don't think, at the box office. Really, I think that's going to be another one that's going to do really well on streaming. It might do better than expected, but some disheartening news with the state of musicals in the box office. We'll take the last 10 minutes or so of the show and touch on this. West Side Story opened this weekend, obviously, and it collected only $10.5 million in its domestic debut. And that makes it an extremely uphill battle for this thing to even break even, let alone be profitable. It's budgeted at $100 million. And I mean, the only thing that I think is reassuring about this is that Spielberg is so Teflon. I mean, BFG is one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. That movie made no money. And he still made, what, 3 movies after that?
Well, it's Spielberg, right? It's not
going to tank his career by any stretch of the imagination.
He can just do whatever he wants now. He has the clout. People will probably work for him for free. They shouldn't, but they, just like the chance to work with Spielberg is a thing. He'll be fine. Let's just say that he was probably the primary driver behind this in terms financially. So it's fine, but it is disheartening to see that effect play out for other musicals, upstart musicals. We said this with Scarlett Johansson, where it's like, if Scarlett Johansson can get shafted on her pay, what does that say about the SAG the entry level SAG-AFTRA two-timer that's just trying to get established in the industry? Same thing here.
Of course.
If Spielberg can't, Steven freaking Spielberg, doing everything right, he has a cast of actual Broadway trained actors, people who can dance, people who can actually sing, not just celebrity whatever, and actually give us a freaking Bernstein and Sondheim musical for $100 million. That's actually, if that's the budget for this movie, that's actually a lot less than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was
honestly, yeah. I thought I didn't look up the budget before I saw it. If you had me guess, I would have probably said 175.
Yeah, or like 200 million would have been my.
This thing was cheaper than I thought it was. This thing was cheaper than I thought. It's cheaper than the BFG even too. I mean, there's not as much motion. There's not like CGI or anything. It's really just scope and actors and whatnot. And a lot of that, I mean, certainly there's intense production values. There's a million extras in the damn thing. But like, it's not, you wouldn't think it was as cheap as it was even still. But it goes to say, though, if Spielberg can't make a profitable musical by, like you said, doing everything right, taking a well-known property, a storied property, what does that say then for the future of the theatrical musical? I was disappointed, not shocked, that In the Heights didn't make much money. I wasn't shocked.
For
coupled with the HBO Max and it was still the dawn of people leery about, and you could even still say they are going back to the theater in the middle of a pandemic. You could absolutely say that, but I am surprised. I wasn't even shocked too terribly with Dear Evan Hansen, but that was more on reviews and bad press even too. This stunned me.
To establish a baseline, In the Heights, budget $55 million, box office $43.9 billion. Actually, not that bad of a bomb. It was a cheaper budget for something of that scope, and the bomb wasn't that bad. Dear Evan Hansen, actually cheaper, $28 million at the high end, and then box office of $18 million. That's not the biggest deficit in the world.
No, but the expectations for that movie were very high. I don't think Warner had their hugest hopes for In the Heights box office wise, money wise. I think they were hoping to break even on it at the end of the day. Dear Evan Hansen, even I forget was it Fox that put, well, Fox doesn't exist anymore. It couldn't have been Fox. I don't remember who put that out, but I remember the CEO coming out and saying that he was hoping that was going to be one of the bigger movies of the fall, and that was going to leg it to like Thanksgiving even too. So the burden of expectations hurt Evan Hansen more so.
Yeah, and then Tick Tick Boom never got a theatrical release. Technically, a box office of $90,000, probably, in just to qualify for some stuff. But yeah, it's am I missing anything else really in terms of like musicals that aren't made by Illumination or Disney?
No, I know we're talking clear cut live action
exactly.
musicals. No, Tick Tick Boom wouldn't have made money either.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was Tick Tick Boom would have Tick Tick Boom would have made the least of all four. Quite honestly, too. I mean, look at how Rent did back in the day. Yeah. But like, I don't know what I do not know. And like, even to talking with just people, and I know it's confirmation bias. The people in Steve Pulaski's world do not make up the broader scope of the country. I understand that, but I talk to a lot of people. Old. I have a big circle of people. I don't understand the societal aversion to musicals. I feel like I almost struggle to find people that really enjoy musicals. Now, I don't watch a ton, but I've never had an aversion to them. I almost feel like, if I see like one or two at a time, that's kind of enough. And then I go a little bit and I watch, but I've never had a downright aversion to a musicals. Like, I feel like that is one of the most maligned genres. Am I wrong to think that, or do you experience that too?
Potentially. My worldview is skewered even more because I did musicals in high school. Those are all my friends.
Yeah, and I have no background.
In college, performing arts. So a lot of my friends were musicians and stuff. So they all
we went to a performing arts college. Really,
So it's like if you talk to my friends, you'd think musicals are the greatest thing on God's green earth. But overall, I do recognize. I have heard of that trend, and I've heard of that stigma. So we're not really the best people to answer this. My guess is that maybe the music is too, I don't know. I'm kind of pulling this out of my ass. I think the music is not down to earth enough, perhaps. Like, it's either like West Side Story is too, like, I'm just going to say old or whatever, kind of old music. Whereas something like Dear Evan Hansen might be too corny. In the Heights, I don't know. I feel like that's, out of everything, In the Heights is probably the most up to date on its aesthetic.
The most modern, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, but
this spells trouble, though. This spells a lot of trouble. I almost think the saving grace for musicals at this point would be if Trey and Matt were to release another South Park movie, like to theaters, or even, I don't even know. I would be hesitant to even say, like, they'd have to do something like Team America. It would have to be something completely different, out of the ordinary, like something atypical if that would almost get people more into the seats. They would be going to see that more than they would be going to see the musical.
If Trey and Matt if they did Cannibal the Musical with a $50 million budget. Did you ever watch Cannibal the Musical?
Yes. Oh, yes.
If they ever did Cannibal the Musical at $50 million, I would camp out of that theater to watch that. I would bring all my friends. I would go all in on that. Now, what they're more likely to do is probably Book of Mormon. Either do that, or apparently there's like a filmed version of the original Broadway Book of Mormon that's floating around somewhere. Wouldn't be as good as the Hamilton one, because obviously that's, they specifically did stuff for that. But I don't know. But yeah, it's just hard to say. You'd have to do like whole sociological like surveys on that stuff. But ultimately, I think it's just because the music is such its own thing. Musicals are its own world, even with very different kinds, like In the Heights versus West Side Story, like Bernstein versus Lin-Manuel Miranda doing rap, right? It's its own world that has this, it's an alluring mystique, but one that is so grand and so legendary and so out there that it might drive people away. You might feel like it's one of those things where the people who might like them get hooked on them, but maybe it's like getting people through that door. Like they need to see one or two to really like, hey, we need to do this again. And so it's like a self-perpetuating thing of like, well, if we're not making that many musicals as a industry, then people aren't going to be able to get accustomed to them and fall in love with them. And then it's like a cycle of whatever. I don't know. I'm sure people have written better things on that, but that's my guess off the cuff.
the final thing I'll add to, and I think this is an important part of the discourse, there's a good box office analyst. I can never pronounce his last name because it's like 25 letters long, but he's a very good analyst. I think his name, I think it's Paul Degarbedian. And he said too, he said, and I'll butcher the quote here, but to paraphrase it in a way, he says they're chasing an audience, they meaning the studio. They're chasing an audience that doesn't rush out opening weekend either.
Right.
Like, he goes back and he brought up The Greatest Showman. He said The Greatest Showman was kind of he's like, The Greatest Showman was kind of dismissed as a flop when it came out because it only debuted to like 8.5 million or 9 million or somewhere around that range. But that movie had historic legs, and that movie stuck around in theaters for almost as long as Frozen did. That thing stuck in theaters for like 4 months. It was astonishing in a way because it was pretty well reviewed. It was generationally appealing. And I think the reason, though, I would not put that burden of expectation on any movie, quite frankly, because The Greatest Showman is an exception, not the rule, in the way that movie performed and the way that movie's gone on to be revered. But with West Side Story, on the other hand, though, the other part of the problem is that the target demographic for this, there was surprisingly a lot of gray hair in my theater too. Like, just to begin with, I was kind of surprised just by that. But no, here what he's saying though is he's like, the over 40 crowd, the demo numbers for like the over 40 crowd since movie theaters have reopened has been very low. So there's still an apprehension of going to the theater from that older crowd, understandably. The 40 and even 50 and 60 plus, who was around growing up when the original West Side Story came out. They're chasing an audience that either waits for like the third or fourth matinee weekend, assuming it gets there, or what they're more liable to do is rent it when it comes out.
It's a cascading effect from the pandemic. We could easily just say that, but people are making less money, less jobs, apprehension of just the theater in general. People are not going out in general as more. So restaurants, you could lump that in with the theater experience. But on top of all that, it's a whole litany of things. But it still makes both of us worried. I know we want to wrap up, but you made such a great point with The Greatest Showman, where that's like that was a cultural tour de force for a couple years, at least a couple years.
Yeah.
Lasting, I don't think so. And I think that's because I don't think Greatest Showman is that good of a movie. I'm going to say that.
No, I think it's a pretty good movie at the end of the day. I think that movie, it's a great score. It's a great soundtrack. But that movie is seriously flawed in a handful of ways that people kind of brush over.
Yeah.
I love This Is Me as much as the next person. And I still think the best number, and that's The Other Side with Efron and Jackman. But like, that's a movie that you could very easily overlook the flaws because you're so wrapped up in the production and the score. It's not a great movie, though.
I always say this. I think people like the idea of The Greatest Showman than actually like living it or like actually watching it. Like, they love the idea of the story, but it's not executed very well. They like the idea that it's a old, classic number kind of song. I don't think the songs are that great in them or that. They all kind of blend together for me, and they're very Dear Evan Hansen. I'll even go so far as to say that the aesthetics of the music in Dear Evan Hansen are more interesting than The Greatest Showman, which is very
that's
poppy.
Cap.
That is big cap. That is big cap.
That is a lot of cap.
Right? I will dedicate to that cap.
You are speaking in caps lock. That is ridiculous.
Here's another thing. Here's another thing to the
point.
I'll move on from that.
I cannot remember a single song from Dear Evan Hansen.
I can think of a few. Greatest Showman, I can't think of a single one, man. It's all this. It all blurs together as the same poppy, whatever the hell. And I like pop, but anyway. To this, I'll say there's a reason why it points in this whole musical, like, our musical's dying. Why don't people like musicals? And why are Disney and Illumination musicals the exception? Animated musicals the exception? It's because those are kids movies, and they are marketed heavily as kids movies, and those bring not only the kids to the theater, they drag their parents in there as well, or rather, their parents they want to shut their kids up for a couple hours and have.
And
them,
it's a lot easier. Yeah. And here's the thing: a lot of even the movies that prominently feature song, it's a lot animated movies rather.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier. Again, what am I saying though? It might not be the music that draws them. It's the animation. It's the characters. It's even the plot or the trailer. It's not even always the music. Like to begin with, it's like Team America World Police. And again, I know that's a bad, seg when we're talking about kids animated movies, but Team America World Police, people were sold on that because it's Trey and Matt, the creators of South Park, and it's marionette puppets. You don't see marionette puppets in movies very often to begin with. So that was a unique sell to begin with. And Matt and Trey can put butts in seats. And then it was like, come for the gimmick, come for the uniqueness, stay for the songs. And the songs just wound up being great, which is really no surprise given, who's writing them.